The most dangerous book you've never understood. Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke. Zarathustra is one of the most misunderstood and controversial books in history. It's been called blasphemous, prophetic, and even dangerous. But here's what most people don't realize. This book isn't just philosophy. It's a revolution. A guide to breaking free from the chains of society, morality, and weakness. It's a blueprint for becoming unstoppable. And yet, most people completely miss its message. They hear the words "God is dead" and assume Nietzsche was just an atheist ranting against religion. But Thus Spoke Zarathustra is far deeper than that. This book is about creating a new kind of human being. One who doesn't follow the herd. One who is stronger, freer, and beyond conventional morality. It's the book that inspired philosophers, dictators, and artists alike. It's been studied, feared, and even blamed for shaping the modern world in ways Nietzsche himself might not have imagined. So what's really inside Thus Spoke Zarathustra? And why is its message still so powerful today? Let's break it down. The Birth of Zarathustra, Nietzsche's prophet of the future. Nietzsche didn't just write a philosophy book. He wrote a prophecy, a tale of a wandering philosopher named Zarathustra, who comes down from the mountains after years of solitude to share his wisdom with humanity. Who is Zarathustra? He's not a real person, but a symbolic figure, Nietzsche's version of a new kind of prophet, one who rejects old morals and dares to create new values. The story begins with Zarathustra's awakening, his realization that the world is full of weak, conformist people, blindly following old ideas. He pities them at first, but then he sees the truth. They don't need saving. They need to evolve. And so Zarathustra begins his mission, to teach humanity how to become something greater than they've ever been. But this isn't easy. The world hates those who think differently. People mock him, reject him, and refuse to listen. But that doesn't stop him, because Zarathustra understands something most people never will. The greatest battles are fought alone. God is dead, and why that's only the beginning. One of the most shocking and misunderstood ideas in Thus Spoke Zarathustra is Nietzsche's famous declaration, "God is dead." This isn't some cheap attack on religion. It's something far bigger. Nietzsche believed that the old foundations of morality and meaning had collapsed, that for centuries people relied on religion, tradition, and societal rules to tell them what was right and wrong. But modernity had destroyed that. Science, philosophy, and culture had eroded belief. But instead of creating something new, people were left with a void. And here's the real danger Nietzsche saw. Most people can't handle life without external guidance. Without God, without a master, without a higher power telling them what to do, they crumble. So what was Nietzsche's solution? He didn't want people to become nihilistic. He wanted them to become something greater, to build their own values instead of depending on the ones they were handed. Because once you realize there's no higher power controlling your life, you're left with two choices. Collapse into despair, blaming the world for your lack of meaning. Rise up and take complete responsibility for creating your own destiny. Nietzsche's Zarathustra chooses the second path, and that's the path he calls us to take too. The Übermensch, becoming more than human. At the heart of Thus Spoke Zarathustra is one of Nietzsche's most powerful and controversial ideas. The Übermensch, often translated as the Overman or Superman. But what does it mean? And why does it terrify people even today? The Übermensch is not just a better human. It's a new kind of being. Someone who has shed weakness, rejected conformity, and risen above the morality of the herd. Zarathustra teaches that most people live like slaves, bound by guilt, fear, and social expectations. They follow the rules set by others, believing in good and evil, as if these ideas were written into the universe itself. But Nietzsche challenges this. He asks, what if morality isn't absolute? What if it's just another way to control the weak? The Übermensch is the one who breaks free. He is not weighed down by guilt or outdated traditions. He creates his own values, deciding for himself what is right, what is wrong, and, more importantly, what is worth doing. This isn't about being cruel or selfish. It's about being strong enough to take full responsibility for your existence. And yet, Nietzsche knew that most people would reject this idea because it's easier to follow than to lead. It's easier to believe in external rules than to create your own. This is why Zarathustra's message is not for everyone. It is for those willing to rise above, for those willing to become something greater than human, the last man, the future of weakness. If the Übermensch represents the highest potential of humanity, then Nietzsche also describes its opposite, the last man. And this is where things get truly disturbing, because the last man isn't a villain. He isn't some dictator or tyrant. He's just comfortable. The last man is the ultimate product of modern society, a person who lives for pleasure, safety, and convenience above all else. No risks, no struggles, no higher purpose. He avoids suffering at all costs, preferring a mediocre life over a meaningful one. He doesn't want to create, to challenge, or to grow. He just wants to be entertained. And Nietzsche saw this as our future. A world where people no longer dream big, no longer fight for greatness, no longer seek to overcome themselves. A world where everyone is just content. But here's the terrifying part. Look around today. What do we see? A culture of comfort, distraction, and endless entertainment. People numbing themselves with social media, junk food, and mindless entertainment. Anything to avoid thinking too deeply about life. This is the last man's world. And if Nietzsche is right, then the only way out, the only way to truly live, is to reject this path entirely. To struggle, to suffer, and to overcome. To become something more. Eternal recurrence. Would you live this life again? Imagine this. One night, a demon visits you in your sleep and tells you this one truth. You will live this exact same life, over and over again, for eternity. Every choice you've ever made, every mistake, every regret, every victory, every failure, forever. Would you collapse in despair? Or would you rise, knowing that every moment matters? This is Nietzsche's idea of eternal recurrence, one of the most brutal and liberating concepts ever created. Most people drift through life like they have unlimited time, wasting their days, avoiding risk, staying comfortable. But if you knew you had to repeat every second of your life for eternity, would you still live the same way? Would you still hesitate? Would you still be afraid? Would you still waste time on things that don't matter? Nietzsche's challenge is clear. Live as if you would choose this life again and again forever. No regrets, no wasted moments, no holding back. Because the truth is, this is the only life you get. And the question remains, are you living it fully? The death of God, why Nietzsche declared it, and what it means. Few phrases in philosophy are as famous or as misunderstood as Nietzsche's declaration, God is dead. At first glance, it sounds like a victory cry for atheism, a rejection of religion altogether. But Nietzsche wasn't celebrating. He was warning. For centuries, religion had provided meaning, morality, and purpose to people's lives. It told them how to act, what to believe, how and why life mattered. But as science, reason, and secularism advanced, faith began to collapse. The traditional foundations of morality and meaning were disappearing. And Nietzsche saw the danger in this. Because if God is dead, then what's left? What happens to morality? What happens to purpose? Most people, Nietzsche believed, would not be strong enough to handle this truth. Instead of rising up and creating their own values, they would fall into nihilism, a state of emptiness, despair, and meaninglessness. And isn't that exactly what we see today? A world where people feel lost, where depression and anxiety are at all-time highs, where people search for meaning in distractions, in consumption, in entertainment, because they no longer know what truly matters. Nietzsche saw it coming, and he believed that unless we found a new way to create meaning, civilization itself would fall apart. This is why the idea of the Übermensch is so critical, because if old values have died, then new ones must be forged. The real question is, are you strong enough to forge your own? Part 8. Master Morality vs. Slave Morality, the psychology of power. Perhaps one of Nietzsche's most dangerous ideas was his breakdown of morality itself. He argued that there were two kinds of morality in the world: master morality, the morality of the strong; slave morality, the morality of the weak. And this is where things get controversial. Master morality is about strength, power, and self-determination. It does not seek approval from others. It is harsh but honest, valuing courage, ambition, and the ability to carve one's own path. Slave morality, on the other hand, is the morality of resentment. It is created by those who feel powerless, those who cannot rise themselves, so they seek to bring others down. Where the strong say, "I will rise," the weak say, "You must fall." Where the strong create their own values, the weak impose rules, guilt, and shame to keep others in check. Nietzsche believed that most modern morality was built on slave values, teaching people to be meek, obedient, and dependent, rather than strong, free, and self-sufficient. Look around. How often are people told to apologize for their strengths, to feel guilty for wanting more, to hate those who succeed, instead of trying to become great themselves? Nietzsche's warning was clear. If you let slave morality dictate your life, you will always be trapped, bitter, and weak. The solution? Abandon the morality of weakness. Stop seeking approval. Create your own values. Live by your own code, not one designed to keep you small. And never apologize for being strong. Part 9. How society keeps you weak and how to escape it. Nietzsche didn't just critique individuals. He saw how entire societies were built to keep people weak. He believed that modern culture, governments, and even education systems were designed to promote obedience, not strength. They tell you, follow the rules. Don't think too much. Do what everyone else is doing. Because a society of strong, independent thinkers is hard to control. But a society of people seeking comfort, approval, and safety, that's easy to manipulate. Think about it. How many people spend their entire lives following a path they never questioned? Go to school, get a job, obey authority, don't make trouble. And yet, how many of them feel fulfilled, powerful, free? Very few. Nietzsche's answer: stop being a follower. Stop waiting for permission. Stop playing by the rules designed to keep you average. Take responsibility for your own life. Build your own values. Chase your own greatness. Because the moment you stop seeking external validation, society loses all control over you. And that's when you become truly free. The Madness of Nietzsche: Genius, Isolation, and Collapse. Great minds often walk the thin line between brilliance and insanity, and Friedrich Nietzsche was no exception. By the end of his life, Nietzsche had become a man consumed by his own philosophy, pushing himself further and further into isolation, into suffering, into the abyss of his own mind. For years, he had lived in near solitude, battling intense migraines, nausea, and insomnia. His ideas alienated him from society. His criticisms made him enemies. He had few friends, no family to support him, and no stable home. Yet he kept writing, because he believed that the pursuit of truth, no matter how painful, was worth more than comfort. But there was a cost. By 1889, his mind snapped. In the streets of Turin, Italy, Nietzsche saw a horse being beaten by its owner. In a fit of madness, he ran to the animal, threw his arms around its neck, and collapsed, sobbing. That moment marked the end of his sanity. He spent the next 11 years in a mental institution, unable to write, unable to think clearly, lost in hallucinations and confusion. The man who had declared the death of God, who had preached the rise of the Übermensch, who had challenged the morality of the world, was now a broken shell of himself. And yet, even in his madness, his influence only grew stronger. How Nietzsche's ideas were twisted by history. Nietzsche never saw his ideas take hold in the real world. But after his death, his philosophy was twisted, manipulated, and misused, often in ways he would have despised. The most infamous example? The Nazis. Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch was meant to be a call for personal greatness, a challenge for individuals to overcome their own weaknesses and limitations. But the Nazis corrupted it, turning it into a racist, supremacist ideology about power over others rather than power over oneself. His ideas about will, strength, and morality were taken out of context and used to justify violence, oppression, and dictatorship. Even Nietzsche's own sister, who had Nazi sympathies, helped distort his work after his death, making sure it aligned with her political beliefs. The result? One of the most brilliant minds in history was falsely associated with one of the darkest regimes in history. But those who actually read Nietzsche, those who truly understand his words, know that his philosophy was never about hatred, racism, or blind power. It was about rising above the masses, not crushing them. It was about self-mastery, not ruling others. And perhaps, if he had lived longer, he would have fought back against the way his ideas were misused. What Nietzsche got right, and what he got wrong. More than 100 years after his death, Nietzsche's ideas are more relevant than ever. His warnings about nihilism, the collapse of meaning, have come true. His critiques of weak morality, blind obedience, and societal control remain painfully accurate. His call for individuals to forge their own path, rather than follow the herd, is still a radical, powerful idea. But was Nietzsche right about everything? Not necessarily. His belief that traditional morality should be completely abandoned is still highly debated. Can a society truly function if everyone creates their own values, or would that lead to chaos? His idea of the Übermensch is also controversial. Is it inspiring, or is it just another way to justify selfishness and ego? And finally, his rejection of external meaning raises a difficult question. If we destroy the old gods, the old values, the old traditions, what do we replace them with? Nietzsche never gave a clear answer. And maybe that's the point. Because in the end, Nietzsche's philosophy, though, is not a set of rules to follow. It's a challenge. A challenge to think for yourself, to rise above weakness, to find your own way. A challenge that, over a century later, still stands. Nietzsche's enduring legacy. Why his ideas matter more today. Even after more than a century since his death, Nietzsche's ideas continue to provoke, challenge, and inspire. In a world filled with noise, distractions, and fleeting ideologies, Nietzsche's call to question everything, to create meaning in an increasingly indifferent world, has never been more vital. We are living in a time when conformity, collectivism, and passive acceptance are prevalent. Social media and modern culture often encourage people to simply fit in, to subscribe to the masses, to follow trends, and not question them. Nietzsche, however, refused to accept this. His work calls for individuals to break free from the herd and embrace their personal journey. In a world that's becoming increasingly divided, uncertain, and volatile, his challenge to become self-empowered, to be your own creator of values, offers a solution to today's identity crisis. Today's world also faces existential crises of its own. Nihilism, the belief that life is inherently meaningless, spreads as religions lose influence and secularism takes its place. Many people today struggle to find purpose, leaving them adrift and aimless, much like the fate Nietzsche warned about. Nietzsche's writings offer a beacon of hope for those who are willing to confront life's hardest truths and take responsibility for creating meaning on their own terms. For those who understand his philosophy, it presents a powerful antidote to modern existential despair. But perhaps the most profound aspect of Nietzsche's work is his exploration of individual strength. His philosophy encourages boldness, self-overcoming, and living life with passion and purpose, no matter how difficult or lonely the journey may be. In an era where people are often content to be passive observers of their own lives, Nietzsche calls for active participation. He demands that we no longer be victims of our circumstances, but that we embrace the challenges of existence with open arms. Nietzsche didn't just want us to survive. He wanted us to thrive. He wanted us to become who we are meant to be, free from the constraints of the past, societal expectations, and conventional morality. This is why Nietzsche's work continues to have a profound influence on countless people, from scholars to creatives to everyday individuals looking for a deeper sense of purpose. It's time for all of us to question, to push boundaries, to rise above mediocrity, just as Nietzsche challenged us to do. The lasting impact: Nietzsche's influence on modern thinkers and culture. Nietzsche's ideas didn't just change the world of philosophy. They have echoed through history, influencing fields as varied as psychology, politics, art, and literature. His ideas have shaped the thinking of some of the greatest minds of the past century, including Sigmund Freud, Martin Heidegger, and Jean-Paul Sartre. But Nietzsche's impact didn't stop there. His challenge to the status quo, his rejection of traditional values, and his call for self-empowerment have permeated popular culture in ways that most people don't even realize. In literature, we see his influence in works like Albert Camus' The Stranger or Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf, novels that grapple with the search for meaning and individual freedom. In the world of psychology, his concept of the will to power influenced the development of existential therapy and humanistic psychology, particularly in the work of figures like Abraham Maslow and Rollo May. His emphasis on self-actualization and personal growth has resonated deeply with modern psychology's focus on empowerment and potential. Politically, Nietzsche's ideas on power and individualism have resonated across the spectrum, from libertarian thinkers advocating for personal freedom to radical anarchists critiquing state control. Although Nietzsche himself never advocated for a particular political ideology, his philosophy challenges all systems of power, urging us to question hierarchies and oppressive structures. Even in modern entrepreneurship and self-help culture, Nietzsche's concept of self-overcoming is ubiquitous. His call to create your own values and live your own truth is central to the success philosophies of many motivational speakers and business leaders today. Whether or not they explicitly recognize it, Nietzsche's influence is all around us, embedded in the language of self-improvement and personal power. Nietzsche's challenge remains clear: live fully, live boldly, and rise above the limitations of your own mind. The darker side: Nietzsche's criticisms and challenges in the modern world. However, as much as Nietzsche has inspired and revolutionized our thinking, there is a dark side to his philosophy that we must not ignore. Nietzsche's rejection of traditional morality, his disdain for compassion and altruism, and his embrace of radical individualism have made him a controversial figure, even among his supporters. His ideas on the Übermensch, in particular, have been misinterpreted by some as justifying selfishness or ruthlessness at the expense of others. His disdain for the weakness of human nature can be seen as dehumanizing, especially in a world that increasingly values inclusivity, empathy, and cooperation. Nietzsche's rejection of universal moral values also challenges our current understanding of human rights and the ethics of compassion. If we take Nietzsche's ideas to their extreme, it raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of justice, equality, and the responsibility we have to others. Moreover, Nietzsche's personal philosophy of self-overcoming can sometimes border on elitism, as it implies that only those with the strength and willpower to rise above others will truly succeed. This vision of the world can be difficult to reconcile with modern values of equality and social welfare. In a world where we're increasingly trying to build inclusive societies and fight against oppression and inequality, Nietzsche's philosophy can sometimes seem like a call to embrace the survival of the fittest, a stance that many find morally troubling. Yet, Nietzsche's work still has much to offer, but only if we engage with it critically. The paradox of Nietzsche's philosophy: confronting our deepest fears. One of the central paradoxes of Nietzsche's philosophy is that while it encourages us to reach the heights of human potential and embrace our inner strength, it simultaneously forces us to confront our deepest vulnerabilities and fears. To achieve greatness, we must first face the terrifying unknown, the discomfort of stepping away from the familiar, from the safety of the herd. Nietzsche challenges us to break free from societal norms, to reject the values we've been taught, and to forge our own path in a world that often seems indifferent to our struggles. This isn't an easy task. In fact, it's profoundly uncomfortable and lonely. To create our own meaning, to dare to be different, we must first reckon with the fear of failure, rejection, and isolation. Nietzsche's message is clear: you cannot rise to greatness without embracing this discomfort. The very act of self-overcoming requires that we take on the burden of our own growth, and that means taking responsibility for our mistakes, failures, and even our own limitations. This is why Nietzsche's work can be so daunting. It forces us to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, including the darkness and pain that comes with it. But paradoxically, it is in this discomfort that we discover our true power. It is in facing our greatest fears, fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of uncertainty, that we transcend them and rise to the challenge of becoming who we were meant to be. This struggle is what separates those who merely survive from those who live fully. Nietzsche calls us to transform our pain into strength, to use adversity as fuel for self-empowerment. It is only when we embrace the abyss, the unknown, the uncomfortable, that we can ultimately find ourselves. The relevance of Nietzsche today. How his philosophy fits into modern life. You might be wondering, in a world vastly different from Nietzsche's own time, how can his philosophy possibly apply to us today? In an age of instant gratification, where social media dictates our sense of identity, and where global crises leave us feeling powerless, Nietzsche's philosophy remains shockingly relevant. Take, for instance, the pervasive cultural climate of victimhood that dominates modern discourse. Many people today feel helpless, convinced that the world is stacked against them, that life is unfair, and that the key to happiness lies in blaming external forces. Nietzsche would argue that this mindset is counterproductive. He believed that we are not victims of circumstance. We are creators of our destiny. The more we focus on what we can't control, the more we surrender our power. Nietzsche's call to embrace personal responsibility and self-overcoming challenges us to confront our discomfort, our pain, and our limitations head-on. This doesn't mean ignoring real struggles or societal inequalities. It means taking control of your response, of your ability to create meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and unjust. Nietzsche would argue that it's not the external world that determines your success, but how you respond to it, how you transform the pain and adversity into a source of strength and growth. In modern times, this can manifest in many ways, from rejecting the herd mentality that dominates social media culture to embracing personal responsibility in the face of a difficult career or relationship challenges. Nietzsche's ideas provide a roadmap for how to thrive in the face of adversity, not through passive acceptance, but through active engagement with the world and with oneself. The myth of the Übermensch, misinterpretations, and modern applications. One of the most controversial and often misunderstood concepts in Nietzsche's philosophy is that of the Übermensch, or overman. At first glance, the Übermensch may seem like a superior being, someone who is beyond human limitations, who transcends morality and creates their own values. This has led some to misinterpret Nietzsche's philosophy as advocating for a form of elitism or even authoritarianism. However, a closer reading of Nietzsche's work reveals a far more nuanced understanding of the Übermensch. The Übermensch is not a superhuman tyrant, but an individual who has achieved self-mastery and self-overcoming, someone who refuses to be bound by conventional norms and who creates their own path in life. This idea is far more democratic than it might first appear. Nietzsche's Übermensch is not an elite few. It is a call to every individual to transcend their current limitations and rise to their full potential. In modern terms, the Übermensch represents the individual who breaks free from societal expectations, the creator of their own purpose, the person who doesn't conform to the status quo, but instead forges their own way in life. In a world that often seems to demand conformity, Nietzsche's Übermensch challenges us to be authentically ourselves, to rise above mediocrity, and to embrace personal greatness, whatever that might mean for us as individuals. Eternal recurrence, living as if you will relive every moment forever. One of Nietzsche's most provocative ideas is the eternal recurrence, the concept that everything you experience, every choice you make, will repeat infinitely. If you had to live your life over again, exactly as it is, forever and ever, would you be proud of how you've lived it? Would you make different choices? This idea is not just a metaphysical thought experiment. It's a moral challenge. Nietzsche is asking us to live with such purpose and passion that we would gladly relive each moment for all eternity. The eternal recurrence forces us to confront our deepest regrets and longing for change. Are we living a life that we can embrace fully, without regret, no matter how difficult the path is? By considering this concept, Nietzsche compels us to make every moment meaningful, to live authentically, and to never settle for a life that we wouldn't want to repeat forever. The will to power. Your drive to control your fate. The will to power is another of Nietzsche's foundational concepts, our fundamental drive to assert control over our own lives and shape our destiny. It's the desire to grow, to evolve, and to become more than we were before. This will to power is not about domination over others, but about mastering oneself and becoming the best version of who we are meant to be. In a world that often feels chaotic, the will to power is a call to take control of your life, to direct your energy towards your own growth. Nietzsche believed that passivity is a form of weakness, and the strongest individuals are those who refuse to accept life as it comes and instead forge their own path. Embracing the overcoming of suffering, transforming pain into strength. For Nietzsche, suffering is inevitable, but how we respond to it is what truly matters. Instead of viewing suffering as something to be avoided or feared, Nietzsche challenges us to embrace it as a means of self-overcoming. Every hardship, every challenge is an opportunity to grow stronger and transform into someone greater. This is where Nietzsche's philosophy intersects with the Stoic tradition. Suffering is not the enemy, but rather a crucial part of the process of becoming. It's only by enduring the pain that we can fully realize our potential. The path to greatness is never easy, but by accepting suffering and using it as fuel, we can transcend it and rise to our highest potential. Outro. Embrace Nietzsche's teachings. In conclusion, Nietzsche's philosophy is about rejecting conformity, embracing self-mastery, and finding meaning through personal struggle. His ideas challenge us to step outside of society's expectations, face our deepest fears, and live authentically. By applying Nietzsche's teachings, we can take control of our fate, transform our suffering into strength, and live lives that we would proudly recreate over and over. If you've made it this far, it's clear that you're ready to confront your own limitations and rise above them. Nietzsche's philosophy offers a powerful blueprint for overcoming adversity and becoming the best version of yourself. So, as Nietzsche would say, become who you are. Subscribe to Real Stoics for more deep dives into philosophy, self-mastery, and living an empowered life.